Hey everyone, welcome back to our deep dive into one of history's most epic tales. Today, we're exploring the story of Moses and the 10 plagues of Egypt, a saga of faith, power, and liberation that has captivated people for thousands of years. But this isn't just a story from an ancient book. It's a high-stakes drama filled with political intrigue, supernatural events, and profound human emotion. We're going to break down these events, not just as miracles, but as strategic moves in a divine chess match. We'll look at the historical context, the psychological impact on both the Egyptians and the Hebrews, and the powerful symbolism that still resonates today. So, what really happened by the banks of the Nile? Was it divine intervention, a series of explainable natural disasters, or something else entirely? Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and let's unravel the mystery of the 10 plagues.
For centuries, the Nile has been the lifeblood of Egypt, a gift from the gods. It nourishes the land, sustains its people, and carries the weight of an empire. Its annual flood is a celebrated promise of life and prosperity. But what happens when the giver of life becomes a harbinger of death? Today, we delve into the terrifying story of the first plague, an event that would forever alter the course of history and pit a pharaoh against a god. The story begins with two men, Moses and Aaron. Standing before the mighty pharaoh, they carry a message from a deity the Egyptians do not recognize, the God of the Hebrews. Let my people go! They demand a bold and unprecedented challenge to the most powerful man on earth. Pharaoh, seeing himself as a living God, scoffs at their plea. Who is this Yahweh? He dismisses them with contempt, his heart hardened against their request. Little did he know, this refusal would unleash a series of calamities that would shake his kingdom to its very foundations. The first blow was aimed directly at the heart of Egypt, the Nile. As instructed by God, Moses commanded his brother Aaron to take his staff and strike the river. Imagine the scene. A simple shepherd's staff, a symbol of humility, raised against the symbol of an entire civilization's power. As the staff touches the water, a horrifying transformation begins. Visuals shift. The clear water starts to blush, then deepens into a gruesome, blood-red hue. The change spreads rapidly, like a wound opening across the land. The vibrant blue-green of the Nile vanishes, replaced by the color of slaughter. The change is not subtle. It's a stark, visceral transformation of the water, once teeming with life, becomes a thick, foul-smelling torrent of what appears to be blood. The fish, symbols of abundance, begin to gasp and struggle. They thrash wildly before floating to the surface, their silvery scales a stark contrast against the crimson tide. A stench of decay, of death, rises from the river and permeates the air, a putrid miasma that chokes the very breath from your lungs. Along the banks, confusion turns to panic. A villager, scooping water into a clay jar, recoils in horror as he pulls up a vessel full of red liquid. He shouts, his voice cracking with fear. The river! Is echoed up and down the Nile. People rush to the water's edge, their faces a mixture of disbelief and terror. Children, who moments before were laughing and splashing, now stand frozen, their eyes wide with fear. Some begin to cry, their small sobs lost in the growing clamor of a terrified populace. This wasn't just a strange natural phenomenon. This was personal. This was an attack on their very existence. The Nile wasn't just a source of water. It was a deity. Hapi, the god of the inundation. To see it defiled in such a way was a direct assault on their pantheon, a sign that their gods were either powerless or had abandoned them. The people couldn't drink, they couldn't wash, and the lifeline of their agriculture was now a toxic cesspool. Pharaoh, summoned to the riverbank, watches the unfolding chaos. His magicians, ever eager to prove their power, are called upon. They take their own staffs and, through their secret arts, mimic the miracle. They manage to turn small pools of water red. See? Pharaoh declares, his voice strained but defiant. It is merely a trick, a coincidence. He dismisses Moses' act as nothing more than clever sorcery, a spectacle meant to frighten him into submission. He turns his back on the suffering of his people, his heart still unyielding, and returns to his opulent palace, refusing to acknowledge the divine power at play. But while Pharaoh retreats into denial, the reality for the common Egyptian is a 7-day nightmare. Every source of water connected to the Nile is contaminated. The canals and reservoirs, the ponzol, have turned to blood. Desperate, the people dig wells along the riverbank, frantically searching for clean water to quench their thirst. The once muddy river, their provider and protector, has become their prison. Meanwhile, in the slave quarters, the Hebrews whisper amongst themselves. They too are afraid, but their fear is mingled with a dawning sense of awe. They had heard Moses' promises of liberation, but many had doubted. Now, seeing the power that fought on their behalf, a new kind of hope begins to flicker. They look at the blood-red river and see not just a catastrophe, but a message. This is the wrath of a God who sees their suffering and hears their cries. A God who is willing to dismantle an empire to set them free. Let's pause and consider the cinematic horror of this moment. The storytellers of Exodus don't just describe an event. They paint a picture of psychological terror. Imagine looking into that dark, red water. The surface is unnaturally still in some places, while in others, the bloated bodies of fish and animals create grotesque shapes as the sun sets, casting long, eerie shadows across the bloody expanse. The mind plays tricks. Are those just ripples, or is something moving beneath the surface? The text hints at this unseen terror, leaving the imagination to fill in the horrifying details. It's a masterful use of suspense, transforming a natural disaster into a supernatural horror story. For 7 days, Egypt suffocates under the weight of this first plague. The stench of death is inescapable. The cry of thirst is constant. The foundation of their world has been shaken. Pharaoh may have dismissed it, but for the people, both Egyptian and Hebrew, the message was clear. A power far greater than their Pharaoh had entered the conflict. This was not a negotiation. It was a showdown between gods, and Moses' chilling words would have echoed in the minds of all who heard them. This is only the beginning. The shadows grew long over the land of Egypt, a heavy blanket of dread falling upon both the grand palaces and the humble slave dwellings. A sense of finality hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The 9 plagues had come and gone, each a devastating blow, yet Pharaoh's heart remained as hard as the granite of his statues. This night was different. This was the night of the final warning. Inside the cramped mud brick homes of the Hebrews, families gathered, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and a flicker of desperate hope. Moses, his voice low but firm, a vessel for a divine decree, moved among his people. His words were not a negotiation, not a plea, but a solemn prophecy. Thus says the Lord, he declared, his eyes meeting the anxious gazes of mothers and fathers. About midnight, I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle. A collective gasp, a stifled sob, rippled through the gathered crowd. The air crackled with the weight of his announcement. This was not a plague of frogs or gnats. This was a plague of ultimate sorrow, a plague that would strike at the very heart of every Egyptian family, sparing none, from the highest to the lowest. But then, Moses offered a path to deliverance, a sign of covenant. You shall take a lamb, he instructed, a male of the first year, without blemish. You shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, and then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. The instructions were specific, a ritual of protection. This was the Lord's Passover, the blood of the lamb. A stark crimson symbol against the pale clay of their homes would be their shield. For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, Moses continued, his voice resonating with authority, and will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. In the flickering candlelight, you could see the resolve hardening on their faces. An Israelite mother, clutching her young son, whispered a prayer, her voice trembling but full of faith. May the Lord protect our children. The task began. Fathers sharpened their knives. The chosen lambs were brought forth, their innocence a stark contrast to the grim proceedings. It was a solemn, sacred act. Hands that were calloused from a lifetime of labor now, carefully, deliberately, smeared the warm blood on their doorposts. Each stroke was a prayer, a declaration of faith, a desperate plea for mercy in the coming storm. The children, wide-eyed and sensing the gravity of the moment, huddled close to their parents, their usual playful energy replaced by a quiet, watchful fear. They were participating in a history they could not yet understand, a night that would be remembered for all generations. Meanwhile, Moses, accompanied by his brother Aaron, stood before Pharaoh for the last time. The opulence of the palace was a world away from the humble Hebrew dwellings. Torches cast dancing, distorted shadows on the hieroglyph-covered walls. Pharaoh, surrounded by his advisors and guards, reclined on his throne, a portrait of arrogance and defiance. He had weathered storms, locusts, and darkness. What was one more threat? Moses' message was delivered without ceremony, without any hint of compromise. He repeated the divine ultimatum, detailing the coming devastation that would sweep through every Egyptian household. Tonight, the Lord will pass through Egypt. Every firstborn son will die. From your own son, heir to your throne, to the son of the lowest servant. But as for the children of Israel, not even a dog will bark at them. So that you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Pharaoh listened, a sneer playing on his lips. His advisors shifted uncomfortably, some even paling at the starkness of the prophecy. They had seen the power of this Hebrew God firsthand. They had felt the sting of the previous plagues. But Pharaoh, blinded by his pride, saw only an empty threat from a desert wanderer. He threw his head back and laughed. It was a hollow, grating sound that echoed through the grand hall, a sound of pure hubris. Your God has tried his tricks, he scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Flies, hail, darkness. I am not impressed. I am a god. My son is a god. We are beyond the reach of your phantom deity. Get out of my sight, Moses, and never see my face again. For on the day you see my face, you shall die. Moses, his face a mask of solemn sorrow, gave his final reply. You have spoken well. I will never see your face again. He turned and walked away, leaving Pharaoh to his laughter and his pride. As Moses left the palace, he looked up at the sky. Dark, ominous clouds, unnaturally thick and swift, were beginning to gather directly over the royal complex, swirling like a vortex of impending doom. The wind picked up, a mournful whisper that seemed to carry the cries of a nation not yet in mourning. Back in the land of Goshen, the Hebrews were now sealed inside their homes. The doors were shut, the bloody sign facing the coming night. They ate the roasted lamb in haste, their staffs in their hands, their sandals on their feet. Ready for a journey they could scarcely imagine, they ate in silence, the only sounds being the crackling of the fire and the anxious beating of their own hearts. Every creak of the wind, every distant sound, made them jump. They were prisoners in their own homes, waiting for the angel of death to pass, waiting for the screams that would signal their deliverance. Turning the Nile to blood was horrifying, but Pharaoh's magicians could mimic it. He remained unimpressed. So, God instructed Moses to take it up a notch. Imagine this. One moment, you're in your kitchen, The next, it's completely overrun. Frogs. Not just one or two, but a heaving, croaking tide of them. Pouring from the river, hopping into your ovens, your kneading bowls, even your beds. The sound would have been deafening, the smell overwhelming. The Egyptians were living in a slimy, amphibious invasion. Pharaoh couldn't stand it. He calls for Moses and Aaron, practically begging, "Get rid of these frogs, and I'll let your people go." So, Moses prays, and just as suddenly as they appeared, the frogs die. But here's the kicker. The Egyptians had to pile the dead frogs into massive, stinking heaps. The relief was short-lived, replaced by a stomach-turning stench across the entire land. And once the immediate problem was gone, what did Pharaoh do? He took it all back. His heart hardened, and he refused to let them go. He thought he'd weathered the storm. He was wrong. Next up, no warning. Aaron strikes the dust with his staff, and suddenly, the very ground comes alive. Gnats. Not just annoying little insects, but thick, choking clouds of them, swarming over people and animals. These weren't just a nuisance. They were a torment. They got in your eyes, your nose, your mouth. There was no escape. This time, Pharaoh's magicians were stumped. They tried to replicate it, but couldn't. One of his own advisors turns to him, his face pale with fear, and says, "This is no trick, this is the finger of God." But did Pharaoh listen? Of course not. His pride was too great. So the stakes get raised again! The fourth plague, swarms of flies. But this time, there's a crucial difference. God makes a distinction. The swarms descended on the homes of the Egyptians, a buzzing, biting plague that corrupted the land. But in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, there were no flies. Not a single one! This wasn't a random natural disaster. It was a targeted, divine judgment. You can literally walk from a zone of torment into a zone of perfect peace. The message couldn't be clearer. Again, Pharaoh summons Moses. Okay, go sacrifice to your God, but do it here, in Egypt. Moses refuses. It wouldn't be right, and it wasn't what God commanded. He tells Pharaoh they must go a 3-day journey into the wilderness. Pharaoh negotiates, desperate now. Fine, just don't go too far away, and please, pray for these flies to leave. So Moses prays, the flies vanish, and just like clockwork, the moment the pressure is off, Pharaoh's heart hardens again. He reneges on his promise. Are you seeing a pattern here? Now, things turn deadly. The fifth plague targets their wealth and livelihood, their livestock. A terrible pestilence strikes the animals of Egypt, the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the cattle, the sheep. They died in the fields where they stood. Imagine the economic devastation. But once again, in Goshen, not a single animal belonging to the Israelites was harmed. Pharaoh even sends officials to check, to confirm it for himself. The report comes back. The Israelite livestock are all fine. The evidence is undeniable. Yet, Pharaoh's heart remains hard as stone. The plagues are now becoming deeply personal, moving from public nuisance to private suffering. For the sixth plague, Moses takes soot from a furnace and throws it into the air before Pharaoh. This fine dust settles on every Egyptian, causing festering boils to break out on their skin. People and animals alike are covered in painful sores. It's a physical affliction that leaves no one untouched. Even Pharaoh's magicians, who had tried to stand against Moses, couldn't even stand before him now because they too were covered in these agonizing boils. The horror is escalating, becoming more intimate and more painful with each refusal. And then comes the seventh plague, a storm of almost apocalyptic proportions. Moses stretches his hand toward the sky, and the Lord sends thunder and hail, with fire lightning running along the ground. It wasn't just hail. It was a supernatural bombardment of ice and fire, a combination that defies nature. It shattered everything in its path, stripping trees bare, destroying crops, and killing anyone or anything caught outside. Again, the land of Goshen was spared. There was no hail there. This terrifying display from the heavens brought Egypt to its knees. Pharaoh, in a moment of terror, finally admits, "I have sinned. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked." He promises to let them go if the storm just stops. Moses, knowing Pharaoh's heart, agrees to pray. But he tells him straight up, "I know that you still do not fear the Lord God." And he was right. The moment the thunder and hail ceased, Pharaoh and his officials hardened their hearts once more. The relentlessness is staggering. Pharaoh is trapped in a cycle of his own making. Pressure, promise, relief, betrayal. With each plague, the cost gets higher. The suffering deepens, and the divine power on display becomes more undeniable. But Pharaoh's pride is an unbreakable wall. He believes he can endure anything, outlast anyone, even God himself. But the worst is yet to come. The plagues are not over, and the final blows will be the most devastating of all. The night air in Egypt hung heavy, thick with a dread that had been building for days. Inside the homes of the Hebrews, families gathered, their faces lit by the flickering glow of a single lamp. They had followed the instructions to the letter. A lamb sacrificed. Its blood, a stark crimson mark painted on the doorposts and lintels of their homes. It was a sign of faith, a symbol of a promise made by God to Moses. They ate in haste, their staffs in hand, their sandals on their feet, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Every sound from outside, every rustle of the wind made their hearts jump. They were prisoners in their own homes, waiting for a freedom they could barely imagine. Across the land, in the homes of the Egyptians, the night began like any other. Life continued, defiant of the dire warnings that had been issued. They had endured plagues of frogs, locusts, and darkness, but this warning felt different, more personal, more terrifying. The prophecy was explicit. At midnight, the firstborn of every Egyptian family would be struck down. From the lowest servant to the highest noble, no one would be spared. In the grand palace, Pharaoh, his heart still hardened, likely dismissed the threat as another of Moses' tricks. He sat on his throne, surrounded by luxury, secure in his power, oblivious to the divine judgment that was about to sweep through his kingdom. His own son, the heir to the throne of Egypt, slept peacefully, unaware of the doom that loomed. As the moon climbed to its zenith, a chilling silence fell over the Hebrew households. They held their breath, clutching their children close. They could feel it, a presence passing through the streets, an unseen force moving with silent, terrible purpose. This was the angel of death, the destroyer sent by God to execute the final, devastating plague. As it moved through the land of Egypt, it saw the blood on the doorposts of the Hebrew homes. As promised, it passed over them, leaving the families inside untouched, safe under the shield of their obedience and faith. The blood was their salvation, a stark symbol of the covenant that protected them from the surrounding devastation. Then, at the stroke of midnight, the silence of the Egyptian night was shattered. A cry went up, then another, and another, until the entire land was filled with a wail of unimaginable grief. From the grandest villas along the Nile to the humblest mud brick huts, the same tragedy unfolded. The firstborn son, the pride and future of each family, was gone. In one terrible, swift moment, life was extinguished. Fathers roared in anguish. Mothers clutched the lifeless bodies of their children, their screams echoing into the dark, starless sky. The plague made no distinction between rich and poor, powerful or weak. It was a comprehensive, devastating blow to the heart of Egyptian society. The gods of Egypt, the pantheon that was supposed to protect them, were silent and powerless. The chaos reached its peak in the royal palace. A servant, his face ashen with terror, burst into Pharaoh's chambers. The news was delivered in a choked whisper. The crown prince, Pharaoh's own firstborn son, was dead. The ruler of the most powerful empire on earth was brought to his knees, not by an invading army, but by an invisible hand. The man who had proclaimed himself a god was now just a grieving father. His arrogance dissolved into raw, gut-wrenching despair. His screams of "What have I done?" reverberated through the marble halls, a confession of his folly, a cry of a broken man who had finally pushed God too far. The symbol of Egypt's future, the heir to the dynasty, was gone. In the midst of the nationwide mourning, a humbled and defeated Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. The flickering torchlight cast long, dancing shadows on the walls of the grief-stricken palace. There was no more negotiation, no more bargaining. Pharaoh's voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual authority. "Get up! Leave my people! You and the Israelites!" he commanded. "Go! Worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds, as you have said, and go. And also, bless me." It was a total capitulation. The proud king, who had repeatedly defied God, was now begging for a blessing from the very men who had scorned. The power dynamic had been irrevocably shattered. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, a strange and momentous procession began. The Hebrews, who had spent the night in fearful anticipation, cautiously opened their doors. They stepped out into streets filled with the sounds of weeping. Their Egyptian neighbors, who had once held them in bondage, now pressed them to leave quickly, fearing that they too would die if the Israelites remained. They gave them silver, gold, and clothing, anything to hasten their departure. The slaves were not just being freed. They were being sent away with the wealth of their former masters, a fulfillment of another divine promise. It was a surreal and dramatic reversal of fortunes. Led by Moses, the great multitude of people began their exodus. An estimated 600,000 men, not including women and children, along with a mixed crowd of others who chose to join them, started their journey out of Goshen. They were no longer slaves. They were a newly formed nation, marching towards a promised land. They carried with them the unleavened dough they had prepared in their haste, a reminder of the suddenness of their liberation. The long, snaking column of people and livestock moved through the devastated land, a testament to the power of their God and the beginning of a new chapter in their history. Their journey was guided not by a map, but by a miraculous sign. By day, a pillar of cloud went before them to lead them on their way. It was a visible manifestation of God's presence, a constant source of guidance and reassurance. As the sun set and darkness fell, the pillar of cloud became a pillar of fire, giving them light so that they could travel by day or night. The God who had delivered them from slavery was now personally leading them, protecting them, and illuminating their path into the unknown wilderness. This divine GPS was a powerful symbol that their journey was not a random wandering, but a divinely orchestrated pilgrimage. The story of the Passover and the Exodus is more than just an ancient historical account. It's a foundational narrative of freedom, redemption, and faith. The themes echo throughout history and across cultures. It is a powerful reminder that oppression does not have the final word, and that faith in the face of overwhelming odds can lead to liberation. The blood on the doorpost became a symbol of protection and salvation that would resonate for millennia. It's a story that continues to be told. The dawn breaks over the Egyptian desert, but the rising sun brings no warmth, only a harsh, glaring light on the smoldering ruins of the palace. A great exodus is underway. Thousands of Hebrew men, women, and children, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and fragile hope, begin their long walk out of the land that has been their prison for centuries. They carry their few possessions, but the heaviest burden is the grief etched onto their souls, a grief now mingled with the terrifying, exhilarating taste of freedom. In his ravaged throne room, Pharaoh watches them go. The air is thick with the scent of death and ozone, the lingering ghost of divine retribution. The groans of his wounded kingdom echo in his ears. For a moment, there was surrender, a broken king letting the slaves go. But as the last of the Hebrews disappears over the horizon, a different kind of fire begins to burn in his eyes. Not grief, but rage. A visceral, all-consuming fury that blots out reason. How dare they? How dare their God humiliate him, the living embodiment of Ra on earth? The fear he felt just hours ago curdles into a venomous regret. He will not be remembered as the Pharaoh who was broken. He'll be remembered as the one who crushed a rebellion. My chariots! He roars, his voice cracking with madness. Assemble the army! Every last man, every horse. We will drag them back in chains and drown their god in the sand. His generals, their faces pale and drawn from the night of terrors, scramble to obey. The thunder of 600 of the finest war chariots soon shakes the very foundations of the city. The elite of the Egyptian army, a gleaming force of bronze and iron, charges out into the desert. A spear of vengeance aimed at the heart of the fleeing Hebrews. Out in the vast, unforgiving wilderness, the Israelites hear it first as a low rumble, a vibration in the soles of their feet. Then, a dark cloud appears on the horizon. Not a storm cloud, but a dust cloud, kicked up by thousands of hooves and wheels. Panic, cold and sharp, rips through the crowd. A fragile hope of moments before shatters. Cries of despair rise to the heavens. Were there not enough graves in Egypt? That you brought us out here to die in the wilderness? They scream at Moses, their voices laced with terror and accusation. They are trapped. The sea before them. The most powerful army in the world behind them. Moses stands firm, his face turned towards the churning waters of the Red Sea. He raises his staff, his voice cutting through the cacophony of fear. Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. As he speaks, an unnatural wind begins to howl, a gale that whips the sand into a blinding frenzy. It's not a desert wind, it's something else, ancient and powerful. The pillar of cloud that has guided them by day moves, placing itself between the Israelites and the charging Egyptian army, plunging the pursuers into a bewildering, supernatural darkness. Their horses rear in terror, their chariots becoming entangled in the chaos. Then, the sea begins to move. It doesn't recede, it groans, as if the earth itself is being torn apart. The waters churn violently and then begin to pull back, not to the sides, but upwards. They rise into two sheer, liquid walls, trembling and glistening under the eerie light, held back by an invisible, incomprehensible force. A dry path, a corridor through the very heart of the abyss, is laid bare before the astonished Hebrews. Moses turns to his people, his eyes reflecting the impossible sight. "The Lord has brought us out of Egypt," he says, his voice low and filled with a profound reverence, but his power is not to be challenged lightly. Hesitantly at first, then, with growing urgency, the Israelites step onto the seabed. They walk between the towering walls of water, suspended in a state of sheer disbelief. Fish swim past them, their eyes like silver coins in the translucent walls. The sound is deafening. The roar of the constrained ocean, a constant, thunderous reminder of the power holding it at bay. It is a terrifying, sublime, and holy moment. As the last of them reach the far shore, the pillar of cloud lifts from the Egyptians. They see the impossible path, and in their hubris, they charge forward, convinced their prey is within reach. Pharaoh, at the head of his army, laughs maniacally, his eyes fixed on the fleeing slaves. He doesn't see the trap. He only sees his prize. His chariots thunder into the seabed corridor. But the ground, once dry, turns to thick, clinging mud. Chariot wheels snap, horses scream and fall, and the proud Egyptian army descends into a panicked, struggling mass. From the far shore, Moses raises his staff one last time. The roar of the water changes. The invisible dam breaks. With the force of a collapsing mountain, the two walls of the Red Sea crash down. A wave of unimaginable power engulfs the Egyptian army. The screams of thousands of men and horses are swallowed in an instant by the churning, boiling water. Chariots are smashed to splinters. Bodies are tossed like driftwood. And then, silence. A profound, echoing silence, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves on the shore. The sea is calm again, as if nothing had happened. Not a single soldier, not a single chariot remains. The Israelites stand on the shore, trembling, soaked in spray. They stare at the placid water that has become the grave of their tormentors. AW, pure and paralyzing, grips them. One of them whispers, his voice shaking, "We have seen his might. We shall never forget." They are free, but they are also changed forever, witnesses to a power that can cleave the sea and swallow armies whole. As the scene fades, their hushed whispers linger. A lesson learned in water and fire, a warning echoing through the ages.